Okay, so what are we going to do today? We are going to help you guys out by connecting you with specialists that know what they're doing and have been doing it for a long time and love doing what they're doing. I'm going to introduce you to Derek Sky. Now, before I do, I just want to give you a bit of a background behind, obviously, how we got started in property and how we were able to be so successful. I think this is really important. The best way that you can achieve success is to follow the steps and processes that successful people make. Okay. Now, straight from the start, we looked at our mentor and said, who are they using? Who are they using within their field of specialists to be able to make sure that they're getting the best advice over and over again? Because I'd rather use someone with experience than someone that maybe is the cheapest or just suggested from someone else. And we looked at companies like Pacific Law. And this is how we got introduced to them. And the relationship has lasted for over a decade. It seems crazy now saying that you really sound old when you start talking like that. And during that time, Derek has got more on his chin, more hair on his chin and less off his head. And I've got less off my chin and more on my head. I don't know. I like to have that short haircut now. Makes me look good. The biggest thing that I want people to take away from this is I want you to listen to the specialist. That's very important. And then see the exact steps and processes. And processes is very important here, especially when you come to legal, that they go through when they are helping property developers. Now, there's lots of stories. I'm sure Derek can tell us, and that's a really important way to learn from other people's experiences. And what I always like to say is the reason that I love working with Derek and Pacific Law in general is because they've had experiences with different people, bad and good. And what I mean by that is they would have set up structures with people and they've worked out very smoothly, and then maybe they might have been in a situation and then they could go back to that structure and they can say, hey, we protected you there, you're okay. They would have also had the opposite, where people would have come to them and said, I'm lost now, I don't know what to do, I'm stuck, something's gone wrong, this is my situation, how do we fix it? So this is a whole point of view of working with people that not only can do you the job, but have had plenty of situations before where things might not have worked out the right way, and they've already gone through that journey so that they can say, oh, well, look, yep, your situation is not dissimilar to something that we've had before, and these are the solutions that we gave that person. Okay, so without any further ado, Derek, can you introduce yourself and let us know about where you operate? Because that's a big thing that people always say. And then how do people best use you? What are the services that they will really be coming to you for?
Great. Thank you, Jason. Thank you for the kind introduction. Yes, I think that you and I met in about 2012 for the first time. And we've been doing structuring and asset protection for a long time at Pacific Law, and it is a passion of mine. I'm very interested in it because I know I'm providing a benefit for my clients. And so I'm based in the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. So we've just been just to the north of the worst of the cyclone that's come through. And that's all behind us now. But I practice in areas of wills and estates and asset protection. So the fascinating areas of law that they don't make movies about. And we help people set up asset protection structures. And I am going to use a few examples from the real world today to illustrate some points that I'll make. I could talk for hours and hours about asset protection. And if you're interested in that, by all means, make an appointment and I'll chew your ear for hours and hours about it. But I'm going to keep it fairly brief today and hit some of the high notes. We, as I say, I'm based in Queensland, but we act for people all over Australia in setting up structures. Companies and trusts that we set up can work anywhere within Australia. And so if you've got plans to invest in any state or territory, we can help you out. Pardon me. And the best way to do it is just get in touch with us at Pacific Law through the website or through the info@pacificlaw.com.au email address, and we can see if we can help you. But I guess I'm going to get started by talking a bit of basics. That might have been me pressing the wrong button there.
Great photo.
Yeah, they're available. They're 10 by 12 glossies if you go through the merchandise section of our website. It's Hillary, my colleague, just told me it looks like a Tinder profile. So I'm not sure about that. I'm happily married and needn't worry about that, thankfully, because things get challenging in our older age. But anyway. So moving on, we're going to talk about what asset protection is. So Asset protection is all about trying to make sure that if something goes wrong, you don't lose all of your assets. Because if something does go wrong, whether it's with work or investing in property or just driving your car around or interacting with human beings on the internet, if something goes wrong and you cause liability to somebody, and you are sued, then all of your assets are exposed to that risk. And so we don't want that to happen. We want to try and limit the exposure of risk, limit the consequences of something going wrong. And it doesn't take bad people for things to go wrong. It's not an issue for only the big end of town like the Jamie Packers and the Lachlan Murdochs to worry about. It's something we all need to think about because we all do face risk. And as I
Now,
say, sorry, go on, Jason.
yeah, I thought I'd just interject here a little bit by putting it into like my circumstances and how did I learn what it was. I mean, you can tell everyone what it is, but the way that I kind of took it on, and I can't remember who explained it to me, but they basically said that I might have things in my own name. I'll have my bank account in my own name. I'll have my car in my own name. I'll have certain things. I might even have my first house. A lot of people with the house that they live in, they just put in their first name, unfortunately, because that's what we're told to get the first loan. And so here's a scenario here. I go down the pub, I get a bit tipsy, I have a fight with someone, I hurt them, they sue me, they sue me. And so they come after any assets in my name. So the whole idea here is as you accumulate assets, if I had my properties and other assets in company names, which is just one of the structures that we can go under, then when they're suing me, it makes things harder. It's not impossible, but it makes things harder from that point of view. And one of the great things was that if you do have even properties all within in one structure and you don't have them in different company names, that type of stuff, other than just yourself, if you know for some situations something goes wrong with that property and it becomes liable, maybe you didn't do any maintenance and someone falls down a step or something like that, then hey, maybe they got some liability over that property, but all your other properties are in different identities, and so that means that okay, they're protected from that one property over there. Is there anything more to add to that? Is that a explanation that I was explained to right? Or
Yeah, that's basically it. You know, the idea is to make sure that if the dominoes start to fall, that we've got a block. We stop the sort of the cascade of assets, and separating assets into different structures is important. You don't just set up one and it runs your business and owns 10 investment properties. That's not the way to do it, because we have had clients that have 10 investment properties in one trust. One of them plummeted in value, and one I'm thinking of, and he lost all 10 properties because of that. So if they were in separate structures, he would have kept them. So that's the way it goes.
right.
And it can happen to normal people. You know, a couple of examples here of risk. I will talk about some property examples later on, but there was one in the paper where a fellow got sued because he was the Facebook administrator of a website, or a Facebook page rather, for single fathers. Somebody posted a comment. There were less than 240 members on this Facebook page. 6 people saw a Facebook post that was a negative comment about somebody else in the membership, and that person who was disparaged sued the administrator. They didn't write the post. They took it down as soon as they were asked, and they still got sued. And only 6 people saw it. So it was a liability to just a poor single father who was trying to help everybody else out. It was only $25,000, I think, the liability in that case, but it could have been more, and it can be the start of a chain of events as well.
Yeah. Now, we do have some things in the chat here. Is it okay if we answer those questions as we go along? Because this is what it's all about, being interactive with people. So Lindy has said here, hi, Derek and Jason. Can you see the chat there, Derek, at all?
I can, yes.
Okay. So what trust would you recommend for a hold and sell? So it's all about time frame here too, right?
And it depends on the exact structure. Depends on exactly what you're doing, where you're doing it, what your role is, all these sorts of things. We need to talk about, are you borrowing? Who's responsible for borrowing? Is it in New South Wales where we have to worry about land tax? Is it a joint venture where there's other business partners involved, that sort of thing? The vast majority of property investments are done through a company as trustee for a discretionary trust. That's the most popular structure. Because of land tax in New South Wales, we start to look at things like a company with its shares held by a discretionary trust, and then joint ventures take it into more complex territory again after that. But it really does depend on a lot of factors.
The number one thing is if you're doing it in Queensland, it's going to be very different from New South Wales. That's been my experience, especially when you get to that land tax thing. Now, sometimes people talk about quick flicks, where you do something, you do a reno, you quick flick it, you put in your own name, you just keep moving on from there. There's certain tax things that might help you out in profits and that type of thing. But I think where we kind of concentrate the most is on strategies that are slightly larger. So ones where you may be doing 2 houses or a duplex or a fourplex of townhouses, something like that. To give you, again, my experience, we set up the trust, we we build the asset, we sell every bit of the asset off, and then we close down that trust. So that's what we'd normally be doing. And under that structure, what would we normally do in that? Company and then discretionary?
So if you're doing a project in New South Wales and flipping it and then closing it down at the end, these days, because of the land tax bill, we might be looking at the company directly doing that project with the shares held in a discretionary trust to keep the shares protected. Discretionary trusts are a very important part of structures usually because they're very strange beasts. Nobody really owns the assets that are in a discretionary trust. It makes no legal sense whatsoever, but we're allowed to do it, so we keep doing it. And it basically means that any person who can benefit from the trust might be sued off the face of the planet, but we're not going to lose the assets in the trust. So in this case, we might have the asset itself, the property, in a company, but the shares in the company represent the value of that property, and they're held through a discretionary trust. So we get great asset protection. We get the ability to minimise income tax because the trustee can pay the profits that come through to you, to your spouse, to your kids, or to a bucket company, which is the company you set up to pay the company tax rate of 30 cents in the dollar.
Now, all this information you're giving us sounds a bit complicated, but this is why we have a specialist. That's what I keep telling people. You don't really, you're hearing everything Derek's saying, but you don't really have to remember it all, right? What I want to tell you is that what you're hearing now is what people do in this industry, what I do, what thousands of other property developers do. Exactly what Derek is saying is just day to day for me. And what I like people to understand is that when you have other things suggested to you, so someone says, oh, but what about this? But what about that? But what about this? My answer to always that is, what is everyone else doing that's successful at this? And so this is what we look at. We go, well, Derek, what is the average person, 9 out of 10 deals you do, what do they do? And then I will say to Derek, this is my exact journey, what I want to do. I want to buy this, I want to build this, I want to flip this, I want to buy this, I want to hold one and then sell the others and pay minimal tax because I won't be making profit. So I've got to give them the scenario. And then they, through their experience of what's happened in the past with people and what could possibly happen in the future, can say, I would suggest this particular trust. They'll also give you another option if you want another option. But the whole idea is listening to them and saying, okay, well, let's use something that has been used many times before and still stood up test of time. Because I know so many people get these new bits of advice and should do it this way, should do it that way, where I think it is at, often I have been accused of being a bit arrogant, but I'm just saying, do it the way that everyone's done it. Now, we do have some more questions here. Do you want to jump into them, Derek? Do you want me to read them?
Yeah, sure. There's one there from Daniel that I'd like to address. Daniel's echoed a similar sentiment to what we've said, saying establish a company shares owned by a trust to do a flip in New South Wales, and then at the end sell the assets and close the trust. It's not quite right. You wouldn't close the trust down. The trust that owns the shares in the company is not incurring any risk. It could own shares in 50 different companies. Just owning the shares is not a source of risk, so that trust would stick around. The company itself might be closed down. It might not be. If you're dealing at the end of town that Jason's dealing at, then your profits are probably going to justify a new structure each time. If it's your first project or two, maybe you want to reuse a structure because you want to try and keep costs to a minimum. And I understand that. Perfect world, you'd reuse a structure. Sorry, you wouldn't reuse a structure. You'd have a new one each time. But they are a cost, so you've got to factor that in as well.
Yeah, this is the biggest argument that when you speak to the layman out there is, if you do a trust structure, it's going to cost you $3,000 a year or something like that, But at the end of the day, I'd rather have that structure in place, especially now where our portfolio has grown every single year, right? That I can go back and I can have a look at this and the cost of it and go, well, if I actually have a strategy like the one we teach, we're actually making money, so it's okay to spend a bit on that. And as the assets grow, that's okay as well. Now, one of the other questions we've got here is great conversation. Which structure is better for build and hold of a positive cash flow property? Now, the first thing I wanted to say to people, because I look back at my scenario here, and Derek, you've got properties too, and I'm sure you do property development as well. If I'm holding a property, I want it in a trust. So if any liability of that property happens and something goes wrong there, then it's going against, it's not going directly to me in my name. So that's the first reason that I do it. What other advice have you got on that?
Yeah, look, the buy and hold is generally a discretionary trust rather than a company, because trusts get a discount for capital gains when you eventually sell, whereas a company does not. More an accounting issue than a lawyer's issue. But again, sometimes it's except in New South Wales because the land tax saving over time might cover the CGT disadvantage of a company. So it really does depend on what you're doing. And to tack on to what you said earlier, Jason, it's a matter of telling us about what your plans are, and then we can recommend the right way to go. The analogy I often use is you don't go to a doctor and say in the first appointment, I would like an appendectomy. You say, I've got a sore tummy. And then the doctor says, all right, inflamed appendix, we've got to get it out. So come to us and tell us all what you're doing, and you might have a very good idea on the structure you're trying to set up. It's perhaps not as complex as taking your appendix out, but we will be able to tell you what's the best way to go to minimise land tax, to save on stamp duty, all these sorts of things. And they are different rules in each different state. So it is something that needs to be done carefully.
Yeah, no, that's great. Now, Bernard's just said the same thing, pretty much what we've been speaking. So that's okay. We've answered that question quite well there. As myself, at my stage, I might be doing 2 or 3 projects a year. And so definitely under those systems, yeah, I like just get in, get out for me, because what's the difference if I close one down and then open one up again? Like, it's the same thing for me as just having one always open, doing more projects. But it just gives me that just extra level of that's finished now, I'm moving on to the new one. So the hardest thing, absolute Derek, hardest thing about trust companies and doing these when you set new ones up that everyone's going to find out is naming it.
Yeah, I always say that's the hardest question I ask people. You've got to come up with a name, but at the same time, it's not like naming a child where if you choose a name that's embarrassing, they get teased in the playground. Your structure won't get teased, but there are rights and wrongs, not so much a legal issue as a practical one. We don't want you to set up a structure called Jason's property development structure, because for a start, if you want to say, hey, it's not really my structure, well, your name's in it. If you want to say to a bank, oh, no, we're not property developers, we're just investors because it's easier to borrow, well, you've got a problem there too. So the name's really important. And, my general advice is just pick something generic that's easy for you to remember and isn't meaningful to anybody else.
So can we help them out here? So my ones, star signs, crystals, and the Greek, the pets' names, the Greek alphabet.
Yep. We have a lot of alphas.
That.
All that sort of thing. Alpha Bravo. We have a few of those sorts of things. But yeah, planets, car parts.
The months.
All sorts of things.
And when you run out of the star signs and you start mixing them up and making new ones and that. Yep. Now, it all sounds quite funny, but it is the next bit of advice I give you. The reason why we had to cut them down was because on contracts, so I want everyone to pay a lot of attention to what I'm saying here, right? When you're signing the contract for a property, if you get one letter misspelled and it goes through a system, and often the other person that's doing it will get it misspelled, then that is a nightmare to go through when having to get stuff back or not settlement, or this wasn't done right or that wasn't done right. So if we are naming trust companies, we name them the simplest thing to do, like red moon, yellow moon, blue moon, that type of stuff. Easiest to spell, guys. Don't get into something that might be complicated.
I had a client who was a tutor, and he thought it was hilarious to actually literally misspell the words he used in the title because he thought that was funny. And every time he went to the bank, they corrected the spelling. It was a very common word. Everyone knows how to spell it. He spelled it wrong on purpose, and it caused him a nightmare. So, yes, look, everything you've said, I totally agree with. Red kangaroo, blue koala, these sorts of things, whatever makes sense for you.
Now, Dominic's got a question. Did you just want to read that out for us, Derek?
So it says here, would I speak to you, Derek, regarding what's safe to the wording when marketing myself as a brand for investors with the ASIC laws? So I'm not a licensed financial advisor, and I've been advised there's strict laws around marketing. So that one's probably a very niche question. The comments that I would say is, yes, there's laws about what you can do in terms of giving financial advice. There's also laws about what you can do in terms of promoting projects to a certain number of people, because you start getting into what's called the managed investment territory, not an area of expertise of mine. So that's probably one where if you've got a very specific question there, maybe send me an email and I'll see if one of our team can help or if I can steer you in the right direction as well.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that I've seen in this industry is that there's this whole thing of two ways of doing joint ventures, right? Most of the time I like, and I'll tell all my students this right up front, if I'm doing the project, I'm the one that's JVing with the money partner. Myself running the project. We see too much of these days of people saying, I will try to get money for someone else's project and funnel it through. And I just don't support those type of things. So that's why that's one thing there. Now, when it comes to doing joint ventures with people within our environment, within our club, people have been taught all the rules and regulations about how we do it. They're aware of it. But when you start going out into the public, then it becomes very different because you have things called experienced and non-experienced investors and wholesale and retail investors, all those type of things. So yes, if you feel that you want to make sure that if you are going to do a mass promotion of gathering money, which is pretty much what we're doing for investment purposes, then yeah, the best advice would be to get someone like Pacific Law on board and get some advice from them. So yeah, when you are starting out, you do actually know what can happen because Derek, we know we've been around long enough. We've seen everything. We've seen people do it the very wrong way, and they're not around anymore, are they, Derek?
They tend not to be. That's exactly right. But yeah, there are some right ways to do it and some wrong ways to do it. What about if I give you some examples of those things? I might skip ahead on the slides and just shoot through some of these things here. I'll give you an example of something went wrong for a client, but prior to us meeting him, purchased a property. This was in Adelaide and it was an industrial property. He didn't do any of the inquiries he should have, so mistake number one, but he bought it in his own name was the big mistake here. It turned out he bought a metal plating business or the site of it. So apparently there's a lot of toxic chemicals involved. He owns this property now and there is contamination. The EPA turns up and he has to do remedial works. He went with the cheapest guy who apparently just poured all the chemicals down the sink instead of properly taking them away. And so it ended up with a multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars cleanup bill. Then he had to do site repairs because the chemicals were so corrosive they'd stripped away concrete. So he had to repair that. There was hundreds of thousands of dollars in repairs. His subsequent tenant had their mechanical tools just corrode instantly because of the chemicals, which makes me wonder about their health, but all sorts of costs. Now, because this fellow owned the property in his own name, he was personally liable for all of these things. And all of his other assets were going to be affected. In the end, he had to sell assets to meet these costs. And, another thing, he hadn't had the lease reviewed. There was no personal guarantee from the tenant. If there was a structure here, now some contamination issues can be passed on to directors, but if he'd used a structure, that would have stopped the liability right there. And if he had other assets in other structures, then they certainly wouldn't have been impacted by this. So it was a real lesson for him about using structures to make sure that the risk stops there and doesn't contaminate him the way that the chemicals contaminated his site. But also get your contracts reviewed and leases reviewed as well, I'd suggest. But that one was one from Adelaide. Here's another example. This was one where it was the wrong structure used. So they used a trust, but in this case, they personally acted as trustees. Now, in this case, there was some very good reasons that they acted as personal trustees, but nonetheless, they did. They did a project. They sold the properties they created and they closed the trust down. But then one of the properties turned out to have major structural problems, which gave rise to a right for the tenant to sue, the purchaser. The purchaser was suing the person who developed the property. That trust didn't exist any longer, but the trustee does exist. It's the individuals. If it had been a company, they could have terminated the company and this liability disappears. But because they were individual trustees, they were personally liable and faced the lawsuit for the structural repairs. So again, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of liability. All they needed was a company as trustee for a trust, and none of that would have happened for them. So it's important to get it set up right. You don't just set up a trust and know that you've got it done properly. It has to be set up the right way.
It's the same thing with when we're building something. Most people don't realize this or don't think about this, right? And it's quite strange when I think over this, right? I'm the property developer. I purchase a property. I get the builder to build 4 townhouses. The real estate agent sells each one of those properties to each person. When the person finds an issue with their property after they've bought it, maybe 3 months in, something goes wrong, the real estate agent should not call me, because the liability is away from me, because the actual liability is on the builder. So this is what people have to understand, that I've had projects before where it's been minor things, but I don't really, once I've sold that property, I leave a handover kit which has all the details of the builder and the insurance and everything like that. There's still 7 years on everything that we've sold. But I've walked away from the project now. Now, I have seen people that do put in their own name in that, and sure, they've got the builder there, but they're also kind of tied to it, because it's kind of like there's this stream of their name connected to this, connected to this. And so if the builder doesn't work right, then they might be able to have some liability against them. And I really love that idea. When the real estate agent calls me and says, hey, someone's had a problem with their unit, I'm like, call the builder, look at your handbook. This is where it is. So that's something else which I love being rest assured in. But
Absolutely.
that, again, your company structure, the way that you set it up has to be done right as to certain people that are delegated within that structure. So again, within that structure, it can't come back to you. So there's a certain way within the structure of people that set certain things up within the trust at certain times, and which person does what when, which again, Derek can help you put the right person in there to totally protect you as well, because that can also come back at you. Now, we have had a question here about overseas structures that are tax efficient, but I think that's getting too much into the broad sense. Let's concentrate on Australia today, because we do have a few questions. Again, we might be able to bring that up separately there. So I'm going to just skip through that if that's okay. So Dominic's got a question about herself. Dominic, call Pacific Law, send them an email. I'm sure they can help about if you outline your situation. I know that you've got an idea and a plan to do something. So outline the whole thing as, this is who I am. This is what I plan to do. This is how the investors will be involved. This is how I should nominate myself. Because, see, Dominic, you're calling yourself a project manager too, and we don't do that, because sometimes you need a project management degree to call yourself a project manager, unless you are one, so you might be a consultant. Again, this is where Pacific Law can come in and say, look, you're calling yourself this, but maybe better if you call yourself this instead. Again, I'm not going to get into it. It's just, you don't have to worry about it, because they've seen these certain situations play out before, where it's better to do this than to do this. Another question here from Kevin. I have a trust with personal trustees with a large tax losses quarantined. This sounds already complicated, Derek.
Look, this one's not too complicated. So
okay.
with this one, Kevin's got a trust that made some losses. So there's losses there. They can be beneficial for tax purposes. Now, a lot of people think, well, I have to use that trust to access those losses. You don't. You can sit that trust off to the side. It's got some losses. And if you don't want to use it for any reason, you do the project in a different trust and distribute the profits to the loss-making trust. But nonetheless, here, Kevin's reused that structure. It's partway through a development. Can you replace the personal trustees with a company? You can. You'd need to be really careful changing trustees when there's assets in the trust. It can attract stamp duty. You obviously would need to refinance everything. It could be a very big pain in your backside, but it is possible to replace the personal trustees with a company. Could you reuse the trust? If it's doing a development, I wouldn't reuse it anyway, but let's say once you get to the end of it, you can have a look at reusing it if you're comfortable that it's not carrying forward risks that you're not prepared to take on. But if those losses were there, I would be very tempted to just sit it off to the side. It's going to be a big benefit. If something goes wrong, you lose that structure, you lose those losses, all that sort of thing. Losses are like an asset. We need to protect them.
Derek, does it also come down to the wording of the trust, though? It has to have those certain terms in it, wouldn't it, to be able to distribute losses?
Yeah. Look, it can't distribute losses. You can't distribute losses out of a trust. Again, more of an accounting thing than a legal thing. But to be able to distribute between trusts, We need the trust that's receiving the money to be a beneficiary of the first one, and they aren't always. There are clauses in trust deeds that sneakily take away the right to distribute from one trust to another. Even if it says in there the range of beneficiaries includes your other trusts, there are sometimes some clauses that undo that good work. So if somebody's not sure, you can always send us a trust deed and we can review it. But you're right, Jason, it needs to say the right things, because what the trust deed says is the Bible. That's the rules for that trust. Even if there's a general position that you can distribute from one trust to another, it doesn't mean that you definitely can.
So no two trusts are the same, in a sense that if you get one that someone else has used before and they said, just use this one, this will be okay, it is not to your situation. So the common thing that I always say is, look at individual circumstances and go, what's your circumstance? What needs to be in there? A lot of things that I realized when I got into this and I looked at my trust compared to other people's and why I didn't protect them was all in the wording. And they might have just borrowed it from someone else or copied it or downloaded off Google or something like this. And this is where, again, you need to have experience coming into that to say, hey, but in the future, this might happen, that happen. The typical thing that has come up here and someone's talked about is about with overseas structures as well. And so, stamp duty and all those type of things coming into it. And with trust, with distributing profits and what type of beneficiary could come in, that's when you need, if you feel that, especially, my wife's Chinese, and so she might have beneficiaries overseas and those type of things as well. So this is where you've got to be very careful. Again, coming back to the wording to protect yourself against overseas beneficiaries as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Look, if you have a trust that was set up, 10 or more years ago, it might not exclude foreign beneficiaries in the way it's required now. And if you sign a contract without thinking about it to purchase property in New South Wales, an extra 8% of the purchase price is lost in stamp duty. And people get that surprise all the time. And if they've set up their structures and they own a property in New South Wales that hasn't excluded foreign beneficiaries, you might get a land tax bill. And we're still getting people that these premium foreign stamp duty and land tax rules were introduced in New South Wales, what is that, around 7 years ago or more, and people are still getting stuck with it. So be very careful about that sort of thing. You need to make sure your trust says the right things.
Yeah, so when the question came here of, so what is the right structure? The right structure is one that suits your individual circumstances.
Yeah, the answer is, if you hang around lawyers long enough, you'll hear this answer. It depends. It depends on the circumstances. So, yeah, we get that question a lot. What is the right structure? It really does depend. What are you doing? Where are you doing it? Why are you doing it? Who are you doing it with? All of these sorts of questions will change that answer. A lot of the time, it's a company as trustee for a trust, but not all of the time. And if you go down the path of that structure and then get a surprise bill for land tax 2 years later, you might be pretty cranky. So be careful.
Now, a question here, do you pay stamp duty if you buy a property in a company or a trust?
Yeah, you do.
Anyway.
It's still a buyer, so the transaction still happened, and the stamp duty rate is the same. I don't think there's any exceptions to that. So, it is the buyer. Like Jason was saying earlier, if you are using a trust, it's like a different person. It's the same as you, except it's a structure that we've created. It is the buyer. It is the one going to the bank and borrowing. You need to make sure your finances approval is through the structure that signs the contract. The contract is signed by the structure. Stamp duty is payable by that structure in the same way as you would. And when you come to sell it, it has to worry about capital gains tax as well, same as you would. GST, all these sorts of things apply with structures. Ideally, we're minimising them.
And at the time of recording, we have to say this, right? So right now it's 2025, 11th of March, because we're starting to see so many changes and surely coming up to the election that all these things about, we're not going to charge you stamp duty in Melbourne for the next year or something like this, or new home buyers won't pay stamp duty, but can a new home buyer buy in a trust? Or there's some things, again, these things change on a very regular basis, especially with the stamp duty thing. It never used to change for the last, decade at least. Mm-hmm. But now suddenly you start seeing all these new things in, like you don't have to pay stamp duty anymore if you're buying a house under this threshold or you're a new home buyer. So that's where, with the stamp duty thing, you need to be up to date on that as well. Again, obviously, if you're using someone like Pacific Lords, it's their job to keep an eye on that more than us.
That's right.
That's
And
why I always.
things like there seems to be a general shift away from stamp duty by the states towards land tax. Like Jason, I'm sure you're aware of the commercial industrial property tax in Victoria. This is the trend. It looks like they'll move away from transactional taxes like stamp duty onto the longer term hold wealth taxes of things like land tax. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's a big move over the next 5 to 10 years from the states in general.
Well, the New South Wales one shocked me with the land tax that you can pay it off over time. Every year you could just pay it, or you could pay it up front. Like, yeah, and then you got to think, hang on, who's this benefiting here at the end of the day? I might pay less now, but in the end, I'm paying longer. So, yeah. So
Yeah,
again,
governments and tax
mm,
changes, Jason, it's all in our best interest, isn't it?
yeah. And when I look at my situation as we've evolved, and you've seen us evolve, right? You've seen our story. You've seen us from the start. We've used the right structures. We've used the right people. We've done everything by the book. Derek, the reason probably why Amy and I have done so well is because we're not cowboys, right? We've seen plenty of cowboys in this industry try to do things their way instead of the way that it's been done before. And Amy and I don't try to give advice or suggest things that rubbery and flexible. We just like to do everything by the book. And believe me, if you do that and you don't try to save money, especially on professionals, but you just use the professionals that have been around the longest, and you do it the way that they tell you to do it, when you're 15 years time down the road, you'll just feel so happy and you'll feel protected. And then you'll also feel that in the future, when you are purchasing properties or you do want to do something a little bit different, then these are the things you can just go back to. And you go back to them and say, hey, this is what I want to do. It's a little bit different, but how would I go about doing this? What have you done before? Especially as you grow, and get better and better at things. And I think that's a really good bit of advice to people, to always make sure that you're doing things 100% correct, and you're not just trying to save a bit of money here or copy someone else's legal contract or something. Even a joint venture contract, if you're copying it from someone else, we've never done that. Every single time we've done a deal, we'll go to Pacific Law. We'll say, this is what we want to do, A, B, and C. And then they will write us an individual joint venture contract. Or else if we want to do a trust, this is how it happens. The other thing that we've also done as we've evolved with our portfolio growing, we've had to say to ourselves, what are we going to keep long term? And, and then kind of worked out the structures on that, especially when it comes to positive geared. I mean, I would say that 90% of our properties are positive geared. And so we've got to look at the profits that makes and how do we distribute it? And how could we pay company tax if we had to, and all those type of things too. And this is, again, where that long-term structure can come in, especially if you've got massive profits coming in. I mean, some people would say that if you've got massive, $100,000 profits coming in from your portfolios, and even in just one house sometimes for us, then, how do we make sure that we could distribute those profits at different areas? So I think that's important as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Tax planning is a big part of why we use these structures. You have to pay tax, but you don't have to pay more than you need to, and you can set things up with a view to, putting excess profits into a bucket company, lending money from that bucket company to other development companies. It can all be done. There's a right way and a wrong way.
And as you grow, you just are thankful that you've had that structure set up, so it does allow you to do those certain things. One of the questions we had here, rooming houses pay land tax in Queensland. There's always going to be a threshold, okay? So this is where it comes into it. So, and you've got to be checking this, because as the threshold is set, the land prices also get increased as well. So this is when it comes to Queensland, sure, there is a thing that is very different from other states. But again, you've got to say, well, how much is the land worth in the first place? And what's a threshold for that? But this is one of the key reasons why people use trust to separate each property as a separate identity in Queensland. So obviously go and get individual advice on this, because I don't know exactly the price of the property that you're buying or what the threshold is there. But definitely, if you figure out, well, this is the cost of the land, then you'll be able to then work out to your individual circumstances, how do you structure it so that you're within this threshold that doesn't have to pay more land tax than you should. Would that be the right way to describe it?
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the tricks we can do, if we know what you're doing and we know it in advance, for example, in Queensland, sometimes we set up more than one structure to buy a property. because trust structures in Queensland get separate thresholds. No other state can do this. And you can put multiple trusts as the owners of one property, get access to multiple thresholds and save land tax. Now, there's increased costs of admin because you're running more than one trust. It's not suitable for every property because banks will run a mile. So it's not something we do for residential properties, but rooming houses, it can be done. Commercial, industrial, it can be done. But that's something that you need to know in advance. If you've already signed the contract, we can't change it.
Yeah, now it looks like we've had a lot of those questions answered there. So do you want to tell us some more? Go back to your slides and anything more you want to update us
Sure
on?
thing. I'll see what my next example here is. This was actually a development. This was a little bit similar to a comment you made, Jason. We had people develop a complex on the water on the Sunshine Coast. There was a very successful, very large project, and they basically set up a structure to do the project. They wanted to retain some of the product created. So some of the units in this complex they wanted to retain, and we advised them to transfer those units to a different structure. That meant that they had to pay stamp duty and they had to work out capital gains tax and that sort of thing. But they moved the property to a new structure. They had an accountant saying, why don't you just keep it in the development structure? In the end, there was a problem with the construction of the building. And just as you said, Jason, it's a builder's issue, but the owner will get dragged into that. Litigation is a shotgun, not a sniper's rifle. It's very blast away and see who we're going to hit. So they would have been dragged into it. But the development structure did not exist any longer. So our guys did not even need to get involved. They continued to own units in this complex in a different structure that had nothing to do with the development. Their structure was just a buyer. They could happily watch from the sidelines as the builder duked it out with the affected owners. And so because they'd set things up correctly from the beginning and there was a cost involved, they got to walk away without having to worry about that liability. I'll give you Sorry, go on, Jason.
Okay. Oh, we've got a question there, but can finish off what you were just talking to us about.
I was going to give an example about a tax saving from a structure for some clients that I was speaking to probably about 2 weeks ago now. These are clients that have a successful business. They both earn more than $200,000, which is obviously pretty rarefied air, but they're very hardworking, very successful people. And they've got a new investment in a commercial property. It's going to net them $36,000 a year. If they owned it personally, they would pay tax at their marginal tax rate of around that $16,000. Because they're going to own it through a trust structure, they get the opportunity to use a bucket company, which is the company they set up to receive distributions and pay 30 cents in the dollar tax. They move that money over there. These individuals are going to save $5,000 roughly on the income from that property. Now, you might say 5,000 is not a lot of money. I'm not sure that I'd say that, but some people might say it's only 5,000. But as a proportion of that income that they're making, it's 1/7 of the income there that they're saving in tax. So it's a fairly significant saving. That's one property. This will compound over time, of course. So there's a very significant tax saving, even if you're not convinced by the asset protection side of things. Now, backside covering lawyer comment over to the accountants on tax planning and cash flow and that sort of thing, but big potential tax savings for these structures as well.
That's great. Now, one of the questions we got here from Daniel about insurance.
Okay. How is asset protection different from insurance? Well, I would see it as a form of insurance. Is that the question you're talking about there, Jason?
Yeah. And then if we scroll down a bit, how does insurance fit in to all this? Should we still get various types of insurance and rely on the correct structuring? Yeah. So when you do get a house, normally, if you buy a house, you've got to get insurance for that, right? And then as you move ahead, you've got a trust structure. I can't see any difference in insurance unless you've seen something before where someone's done something smart with the insurance.
No, there's no sort of savings from an insurance point of view that I'm aware of with trust structures and no necessarily additional cost that I'm aware of. But it's two different things. They're both about protecting you from things that go wrong. If you can insure for a reasonable cost, insure. The reason that insurance companies exist and make profits is by not paying insurance claims. So they're not in the business of forking out money every time you ring them and say that your house fell down. They're about trying to get out of it. And that's why we still need asset protection. The risk that arises might not be insurable.
But we'd still have public liability.
Absolutely. And your claim might exceed your insurance. So you might find that you've got insurance up to $1 million for something, but the claim's $2 million. One of the examples that I could say about liability for a client, This was a person that was a funds manager for a major institution. They happen to have their little niche business, and a major institution that we've all heard of pays this fellow to manage a certain amount of money. He sends them a check every year, or transfers $3 million every month. Every month he transfers $3 million back to this institution. He was about to press send on his transfer when this person that he deals with at the institution rang him, and he said, "Oh, while I'm talking to you, why have you changed banks?" And the guy said, "We haven't changed banks." So there'd been an email hack, a cyber breach. This guy was about to transfer $3 million. There is no insurance for that. So he was also, incidentally, he'd said he's not really worried about asset protection, can't see where a liability would arise, and then told me the story of nearly transferring $3 million to Russia. But anyway, so look, there are these risks. They do exist. Insure everything you can insure, but have asset protection. You'd be crazy not to, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a pretty big scam at the moment, that they can get into the broker's side or the real estate agent side of their email. So it might not even be your email, and then forge the actual document of where you've got to send a deposit or make the final payment. And suddenly you've given the wrong bank account over. I do a lot with NAB. And every time I go in there, it's pretty much the same people that we're using, the lawyer that we use to do the transactions through. And they always say, have you checked that that's the right account? And we're like, well, we've been using it for 10 years now, so should be okay. But we still make the phone call and go, just want to double check, is this the exact account? Because when we're talking to them on the phone, the exact person that that is asking for the money, then we double check that. So I think that's just a thing that you automatically do now, even though you've got that account number, whatever you got there at the bank. You make the phone call to double check that this is the exact bank account. I mean, the common thing that's happening more than anything is cars, is when people are buying cars and they're getting into the car yard and then they've transferred it to the wrong person. That's the most hacked one, I think, out of all of them.
We're getting news down the line from the Law Society here in Queensland that it's about to get even harder because, yes, we're told you have to ring to confirm details first. And they're saying that the AI voice imitation is at such a level that you can't rely on knowing, I know what Jason's voice sounds like. I could close my eyes and recognize you. Not so much anymore. It's the AI is at that level where you have to, what they're saying is, we're not at the point yet, but they're likely to say you need to set up a code word with somebody in advance.
That's what I was going to say. We need to go back to what's
a safe word.
Password.
Yeah. What's your safe word for a transaction? But anyway, we're not quite there yet, but we're just about there.
Yeah. Now, one of the questions we had coming out of what we talked about before there, how to use a profit money if it is in the trust?
So trusts distribute. This is really treading on the accountant's toes. So you need to talk to your accountant. But money comes out of trusts as a general rule. They are a flow-through vehicle for profits because they pay the highest marginal tax rate themselves, but they distribute the profit to a beneficiary who pays tax at their rate. So where you put the money depends on what your accountant tells you about who should get the money to pay the least in tax. Yeah. So that's important to take that advice. It might be you, spouse, bucket company, that sort of thing. It's also
it's very much,
in my opinion,
aligning. It's very much aligning this all together with the accountant. So
the accountant might say something different to what I say. So I get a lot of clients who say, I have a company that runs my business and the accountant says retain the profits there because you'll pay 25 cents in the dollar. And that's true. If you pay it out to a bucket company even, you'll pay 30 cents in the dollar. But if you retain profits in a business entity or a development entity and something goes wrong in there, you lose those profits. So I always say to people, strip money out. Do not retain profits in a business. Do not retain profits in a development entity. Get them out, get them away, get them protected.
Yeah. Now, the other one there, Dominic said she emailed you, so I think that'll have behind the scenes if that's okay. Mm-hmm. Marion says, does Pacific Law have affiliations to accountants and financial advisors who understand this can work? I think the easy answer to that, again, me being the mentor, I want you guys to follow what I do. Look at our specialist section. There are people there that have been very consistent with our history of what we've been doing. Derek will know them anyway because they're part of the system that we've grown up with anyway through ventures with Derek and other people that Derek's aligned with anyway. So yeah, go and have a look at those people there. And then sure, there are situations too where someone might not be giving you exact great service. So even this is where it's hard for me sometimes, Derek, and you'll know this. Just because you say, hey, go to this person, they'll be great, you don't know what's going on with their life. You don't know how they're going to treat people and that type of thing. Someone says, give me a good builder. I'm like, well, oh, you still got to investigate the person you're working with. It's all about service, right? And I think, again, that comes down to law, down to everything we've just been talking about what's the reputation of that company. Who are they using? Are they just using people that might be, I'm sure you've got what I call apprentices or whatever in the law firm that come through and do stuff. And do you check their work? I bet you do. But there might be other companies that people are using them that might sound okay, but then that one person has been in charge of that and they've stuffed it up. So I think even though you do go and get advice, and you do go get the trust structure, it's a good idea to just double check through whatever documentation you've got before you sign it. I know that we do.
Yeah,
What do you
absolutely.
think about that, Derek?
Oh, absolutely. And you've got to click with your professional advisors. You might have a very good lawyer, accountant, financial advisor, loan broker, whatever, but they just don't align with the way you like to do things or don't communicate in a way that, suits you. And that can happen. And, speaking as a professional, sometimes that goes the other way as well. Jason, as you said, you don't cut corners, you do things properly. As a law firm, we like that. I don't like a client that says, oh, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, we'll smooth it through, because those are the clients that when things go wrong, point their finger at you and say, why did you let me do this? But it just creates a minefield for everybody. So we like people that do things, by the book and like to receive good advice and proper advice. And, so it's important you click with your advisor, I think.
Yeah, and I know that we're talking about structures here, but whenever I see issues where something's gone wrong, and we hear it all the time. Oh, they'll even come up to you, Derek, and they'll go, "Oh, I got into this contract with this guy, and then we're in a JV relationship, and blah blah, and this has happened now, and he's gone west or something, or he put the money into another project, and and I don't know where it is, or his time frame is too long now, and it's not what we agreed on." These are things that we hear, almost every month, right? And then the simple thing that I say is, do you have a contract? Or who did you get that contract that this person wrote up that you signed reviewed by? So this is why I just say, when I teach people, I say, if you get a JV contract, send it to Pacific Law. Get them to look at that to make sure that you're covered. And if you don't do that, it's your fault.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and it costs money, and I get that for, things like in my area, asset protection, the JV contracts, that sort of thing. They cost money. But if something goes wrong with asset protection, people don't just sort of gently sue you. They are hooking into you, both barrels. So you want this stuff to stand up to scrutiny. You want your joint venture agreement to be able to withstand a fight amongst joint venture partners. And I've seen that between mothers and sons and sisters and, best friends. When you're fighting over it, if you've got that really solid base, you've got some confidence that you are arguing from a position of strength. And I couldn't tell you the number of times I've had somebody say to me, yeah, we've got a joint venture agreement, nobody signed it. Well, you don't have a joint venture agreement. Let's get it done properly if you're going to do it, is my view. Now, I do understand that there's cost pressures and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. And you've been really good, because we've had joint ventures with people and they've taken JV contracts to you, and you've come back to us. And we've often had to get different lawyers involved, but that's okay. We've got plenty of people at your level that even you suggested to us as well are good law firms, because you can't have the same law firm going both directions. And you said this needs to be changed and that needs to be changed. And I mean, we've admired that, because we said, okay, I can see what they're trying to protect here. Yeah, that's okay. And so you're not worried about really making sure that the other party isn't aware of their obligations as well, if it is a worker partner or money partner, where that comes in. And again, that would come through situations that you've seen gone down the line, and this has happened wrong or that's happened wrong. Now, one of the questions we've had come up here, again, I knew as soon as you said bucket company, a few questions are going to come into that. The bucket company, is that the company that pays tax? Can you transfer that money to your bank account?
Once you've paid, if you tell the tax office you've sent the money to the bucket company, you need to send it to the bucket company. And if it comes back to you, you either need a properly written loan agreement, which is called a Division 7A loan agreement, or they're going to treat it as a dividend back to you. You need to be careful. There's a lot to this, so that's a another long answer. Yeah. But yeah, accounting query as well, really there. Bucket companies do restrict what you can do with the money, but there's ways around that or ways to deal with that. So it's got to be.
It's got to be worth your while. It's only at one point that you would actually set up a bucket company. It can't just be for small. It's not something that you even need to grow. Like you do it when you need to do it, because sometimes it's just not worth it. I mean, it's another thing, another extension. So again, you go on your accountant and say, do I need this? When do I need this? What should I do with it now? It's there. Again, individual circumstance, as what you've heard here.
Yep.
What
It's
are
another
the
crunch. What is it going to literally save you in tax? If it's going to save you $100,000 in tax, you're going to do it. If it's going to save you $500 in tax, it's not worth the hassle.
Now, one of the questions we got here, and we've kind of cut sort of time now, so I'll let you finish after this question. What are we looking at fee-wise to set up a JV contract roughly? So, Tammy, the first thing is, where I come from, where I've noticed with my certain deals, is the complication of a deal will always come into it. Is it a simple loan agreement? Hey, this is going to be borrowed and this is a percentage return. It's going to be over 1 year or something like that. Or is it going to be something that has to look at the liability of the project? So it will all come to the amount and the sophistication of the project. That 1 into 2 is going to be different from a 1 into 10. So as the deal grows and different factors come in, then this is where things will cost more, obviously. But do you have anything to say against that, Derek?
No, look, that's it. It's the answer, like I said before, it depends. But to give you a ballpark, so I would be surprised if you can get a joint venture agreement. I don't do them personally. My colleagues here do them. I'd be surprised if you could get one for less than $2,000. And I'd expect that more complex ones are nudging $10,000. So it's probably around the 2, 3, 4, 5, that mark I would expect. But it's really one where you need.
That's what you pay for it, but what is the value of it?
Right.
The value of it could be hundreds of thousands.
If you get into a dispute, the cost of doing an affidavit in that dispute will be $10,000. So, provided the deal stacks up, if you tell me we're going to make a profit of $5,000 on this project, are you going to spend $4,000 on a JV agreement? No, you're not. But we have to be proportional here. And
to me, a JV contract is really it's like an agreement. It's like the terms of a trade agreement with two countries. We're doing this, but we're not doing this. If this happens, we do this, we don't do this. This is what it is to me. A JV contract pretty much outlines so that both parties understand this is the circumstance we're doing. So it clears up all that grey area. That's what a JV contract is, and it can save you, because I've seen things where someone has said, well, I'll help you subdivide your property. Does that mean that you're going to sign every document and build the fence? And what is help?
You'll pay for it.
Oh, I've seen someone get, they were saying, oh, for $20,000, I'll help you subdivide. And it ended up costing this person $100,000 of their own time and maintenance and problems and fences and everything. And they just didn't have the contract. So anyway, what's the best thing that we can end them with, Derek, here? What do we reckon? Obviously, give us your details. And then tell us about Pacific law in general. How does it help people? Not only what do you do, but what other services can Pacific law provide?
Sure. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, look, we basically help with the things that property investors and developers want to do. We do property law, and that includes conveyancing, joint ventures, development projects, that sort of thing. We do things like business leases, that sort of commercial side of things. I do asset protection if you're worried about protecting assets, even existing assets. If you already own 5 properties and you want them protected, there's ways we can do that, and wills and estates and that sort of thing. So we have
wills and estates. Wills and estates is huge.
Yeah, I see that as asset protection too.
I've gone through that recently with my father passing away, and it's the same thing. Often when people, how do I best pose this? Getting older in life will swap a property within the last 10 years to downsize. And then when you're doing that, when one party is left behind, when they purchase that next property, is it tenants in common or joint tenants? Like different bits of advice I've had to that to make it easier in the will process, so that when one property was transacted, so sold their big property, downsized to a small property, we did the contract so that it made when one person passed away, it didn't give all that money to the other spouse, so but they weren't in that situation. It kind of separated that so that could then be gifted down to, or in the will given to one of the spouse, one of the siblings. And so therefore that control could happen differently. That was very important, I thought.
Yeah, look, and it's important to do these things and do them properly. You know, an example from 2 hours ago, I had a meeting with a fellow who I've acted for a long, long time, and his wife has just passed away and he was devastated. And we just had a meeting about what happens now. And honestly, that meeting went for 5 or 10 minutes because everything is sorted. We've taken care of everything. It's going to be a really easy process for him. And, you know, this is a conversation where, you know, we're tearing up having the conversation because it's very sad. You don't want to be told, well, actually, you didn't deal with this properly. Your super's a mess. Your life insurance is a problem. We've got to sort out these assets properly. All the hard work was done for him in 2018. We sorted it out. So now it's just a matter of getting through this and past it and focusing on the grieving and all those things that are much more important.
And obviously, having a good will come down to people not arguing.
Yeah.
Afterwards, this is exactly what was stated. And if you want to set up a trust for people in the future, then you can do those type of things. So that's why it's really good. And do you do wills as well?
Yes, I do wills personally. We have a team here that does them. So wills are state by state. So with something like trusts and companies and asset protection, we can help anyone in Australia. I can help people in Queensland. We have a New South Wales wills team and a Victorian wills team. We don't have teams outside those states for wills, but if we can help, send us an email, info@pacificlaw.com.au, and we'll see if we can help you.
That's great. Thank you very much for your time today, as always. I feel that what makes this industry as being property developers, no matter whether you're small or big, easier to do and when you can kind of relax is where you have a team behind you that is looking out for you, and a confident team that you don't have to worry about when certain things come up. I can just call them, or I can just go, this is my situation. What should I do now in this situation? I'll always say, this is what I think I should do, and this is what the outcome that I want. But being able to just have people with experience that are probably going, yes, we've seen that happen this way or this way. This is the right direction that we should be taking. It's just so easy to go about when your portfolio does grow. And I think that's important to always don't feel like you need to know all this stuff, because this is the biggest thing. Everyone's like, I need a copy of this, I need to do this, I need to figure out this and understand that again. Really, when a time comes, it's a very simple situation. You can just rely on them 100%, tell the situation, and they can tell you the exact situation that you need to set up for individual projects. Because I can tell you, out of my whole history of when we've been doing projects, they're all different. They're never, ever exactly the same. So different structures as you grow will change as well, because your portfolio changes as well. So I think that the three people that I always try to connect together is the legal side, the accounting side, and my broker. I need them to all be on par together. And so I need them to explain, well, what legal structure am I doing to my accountant? And then also take to my accountant and then say, this is what I've agreed on with my lawyers, my accounting, and then go to my broker and say, is there any needs to be changed here, or is this okay to move forward? And you get those three people together and everything's quite smooth, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, beautiful. All right. Thank you very much. See you later, everyone.
Thanks, Jason.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.